I recently raced my first Hyrox in Berlin and I finished with a time of 1 hour, 29 minutes and 20 seconds. However, it was not the time that I was hoping for. I'm hoping for around a 1:15 time, so fingers crossed I get that. In this video, I'll break down exactly where I lost time, the mistakes that I made so that you don't make the same ones, and I'll share what changes I'm making in preparation for my next race that you should also consider. So if we look at the breakdown of my race, total time 1 hour, 29 minutes and 20 seconds. That consists of 31 minutes and 5 seconds from the 8 1-kilometer runs, although in Berlin the runs are a little bit shorter. The workouts or functional exercise stations, 45 minutes and 33 seconds. This is where I made some big mistakes and where you can really save some time by not making the same ones. And the rock zone was 12 minutes 42 seconds. That seems really high, but in Berlin the rock zone is very long, so actually that time isn't too bad. So if we look at the runs first, I went hard from the gun, arguably a bit carried away, but really it worked in my favour. And as you can see with the data here, I was maintaining a relatively consistent pace. There was a decline from the first run through to the last, but most notable are run 7 and run 8. I think the reason for there being such a change is the amount of fatigue that was built up in my legs, and that is directly attributable to this 2 or 3 of the previous exercise stations that really took me a lot of time and put a lot of fatigue onto my legs. So what would I change with the runs? Not too much. I would still maintain a consistent pace. What I would like to see on a future run, and this is what I recommend for you as well, is to have a pace in mind and really try and stick to that. So now if we move on to the exercise stations, number 1 is the ski erg. 4 minutes 39. I came into the station after quite a fast-paced run to complete the ski erg in 4:39 and get out for the next run at also a decent pace. I'm happy with that. I've heard it said before, you don't win the race because of a fast ski erg, but you can lose it. Yes, I could probably shave 10-15 seconds off this time, but I'm not sure the amount of effort makes it worthwhile because it could impact the run. Next up is the sled push and sled pull, so stations 2 and 3. In Berlin, it's often said that the sled stations are very slow to do with the carpet, the turf and friction. I haven't got a previous race to cross-reference, so I can only go with my times. At the same time though, I do also have fingers crossed that in future races the sled will push a little bit easier or pull a little bit easier than it did with these. 2:56, I don't think there's anything I could have done that would have really improved that much more than the time I got. I took little breaks on each of the lengths, so 1 break per length, and that just helps with the lactic acid build up and means it's a little bit easier to carry on with the next run. But my advice is make sure you do take a break on each of the 12.5 meter lengths. Sled pull, this is a strange one for me. 5:34, very slow and not what I was hoping for. I was hoping for perhaps around 4 minutes. Now some of this might be to do with the sort of slow carpet condition that I mentioned earlier. I did receive an early penalty warning for placing the rope behind the box. I think actually that was an incorrect warning because I believe you can put the rope behind you. However, it did affect me a little bit because I was then just ultra cautious to make sure that I didn't get another warning, which would then be a 15-second penalty. My advice to you on the sled pull, if you do get a warning, don't let it get into your head, don't let it affect your race, just carry on as you were, just don't get overly caught up on the fact that you've had a warning. Burpee broad jumps, these were painfully slow. 9 minutes 29 tells its own story. I underestimated the distance of 80 meters and what that feels like. I didn't practice it enough in training. My burpee broad jumps were very slow. Each one was like a individual burpee broad jump rather than one leading to the next, leading to the next. There was no sort of linking of them. So that made for a very, very slow station, reflected in the time. My advice is practice these much more in training. If you identify it as being one of your weaknesses, as it was with me, repetition will get you better and make the movement a bit more fluid, and make sure you practice race distance every so often as well, so that you're familiar with how that feels and what the fatigue in your legs will feel like. The row, only a little bit disappointing, 4:59. I was hoping that I would be around a 4:20, 4:30 pace. And I think I probably would have been close to that, but I did have an issue at the start. The pocket that you put your foot onto was loose. I wasn't able to get my heel in very well. And so I spent a bit of time faffing around with that. There's a photo from the race where you can see that I'm trying to adjust it. And I think that's probably what cost me 20, 30 seconds trying to fix that out. So otherwise I'm happy with this. And my advice is just to make sure that your foot is in properly before you get started. Yeah, and make sure you practice these in training. One of the things that I regret not doing is practicing both the row and skier more often in training, and that's something that I have introduced in my training since Berlin to prepare me for my next race in Istanbul. Farmer's carry, I'm happy with this, 1:53. I think if I could have gone a little bit faster, maybe it would be 10 to 20 seconds. It's not where the biggest improvement in my race would have occurred. That's going to be from burpee broad jumps or the sandbag lunges that I'll talk about in a second. What I've introduced into my training since this race, and that's what I recommend for yourselves as well. Practice the distance. Don't need to make it 200 meters for every session, but certainly every 2 or 3 weeks, I think it's a good idea to practice a race distance for one of the exercises. Next, sandbag lunges, 8 minutes, 4 seconds, very, very slow. I had some knee discomfort about 3 weeks before this race, and that definitely impacted my sandbag lunges, but it's not the only reason that I was slow. Much like the burpee broad jumps, is that I wasn't linking the lunges together. So each one was a separate standalone lunge. So it was very stop-start, and that's just slow. What I would change is really the same as burpee broad jumps, and this is what I recommend to you. Every now and again, practice that race distance or close to, and get used to that feeling of the fatigue in your legs. I've practiced it a few times since, and happily my time has been coming down nicely. I'm hopeful that in my next race I'm going to do much better than 8 minutes. Wall balls, 7 minutes 59 seconds. I didn't practice 100 wall balls enough in training, and I could tell, you know, with all the accumulated fatigue from all those other stations, especially the burpees and sandbag lunges, when I got to the wall balls and I'd had that slow last run as well, my legs were pretty cooked. My first set of reps was 18 unbroken, and then after that it was a declining number, so it takes a long time to get to 100. 7 minutes 59 apparently, when you are doing them, you know, in such short numbered reps. What was good is that I only had 4 or 5 no reps, and they were for missing the target rather than my squat depth. Like my problem lunges and burpees, I've increased the number of times that I'm doing wall balls, and I'm making sure that I hit 100 under fatigue as well, so I know what that feels like. The biggest takeaway for me, and what I would suggest for yourselves, is to get really good at a strong first set of unbroken wall balls, because it makes the rest much easier. My next race is in Istanbul, 1st of August, about 5 weeks away. I'm excited to see how my training will impact that race, and whether my time will be better than 1:29:20 that I managed in Berlin. Fingers crossed it will be. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I'd really appreciate it if you would hit the subscribe button. I hope your training goes well, and I'll see you on the next one.